Good enough never is a phrase I have worked with for over 17 years. What does it mean? Where did it come from? And why are we talking about this now? Today we're going to look at Colossians 3:18 through 25 with an eye toward the life we live, the relationships we have, and how this affects both our testimony and our life experiences. So good enough never is. Let me give you the backstory. And Colossians 3:23 says, "Work willingly at whatever you do as though you were working for the Lord rather than for people." Now, I went to work in my present job November of 2006, and the man I worked for was a gentleman by the name of J.P. Nelson, and J.P. had a motto for his employees, for his life, and that was, "Good enough never is." And J.P. Nelson was someone who had accomplished a lot in life. He was a officer for the city of Los Angeles. He was there during the Watt riots. He was a competitive shooter and had many awards for his shooting. He had served in the military as a Marine, and he was somebody that was not difficult to respect. The way he carried himself, how he did things, he is a great guy. He's not dead. He's a great guy. And quite honestly, since he retired, he's gone on to, he started doing bodybuilding, and he's been recognized as, like Mr. Universe in his age class and all kinds of stuff. So everything he's ever done, he's always excelled at. But he went through a phase in his life, and when he found Christ, it was life-changing for him. And he heard a teaching by Max Lucado, and I don't know for sure it was on Colossians 3:23, but I think it was. But from it, it talked about doing our best for God. And from that, J.P. Nelson created Good Enough Never Is. And it's an attitude that I'm not going to dismiss my efforts by saying, "Oh, that's good enough." Because good enough never is, right? So an attitude of excellence. Be first is the way he always put it. Be first to get something done. Be first to submit it. Be first in what you do. Be best at all these things. Not so you can pump your chest and say, "I'm really wonderful," but because you're doing it for God at the end of the day. And it's easy to forget that sometimes as we go through life. And we can lead ourselves into kind of perfectionism, right? And that's not what it's about either. It's about who are you accountable to. I had somebody work on a car one time, and they were working on the car for me, and they said, "Oh, well, it's not my car." And I heard them. I said, "I don't need you to work on this anymore." "Well, why?" I said, "Because I don't like that attitude." "Well, I wasn't going to, I don't care. I just go. I don't want to have you do stuff anymore. If you don't have an attitude of excellence and trying to work on it, then please don't." Okay? So again, not leading to perfectionism, but who are we accountable to? And some of that has to do with self-forgiveness. Okay? Self-forgiveness. We can just excuse away whatever we do, forgiving ourselves through ourselves, right? Well, it's okay if I do it this way because I'm me. I mean, I know what my intent was. I know what my thoughts were, and so it just doesn't matter if I didn't do it very well. It's okay. I just excuse myself, right? That's kind of what I would call self-forgiveness. It's not based in who we're accountable to. It's based on who we're not accountable to, right? We're just doing our own thing, right? And that's different than being forgiving. Being forgiving is a choice. You choose to forgive. And things that are difficult to forgive, you have to go back and keep forgiving over and over again until you really forgive. And I've said that, the real test of when you've forgiven something is when it no longer hurts, when it no longer has a life, when it's dead. And I've had folks tell me, that's not realistic. You can't expect that to be the case. That's true. You can't if you're forgiving from yourself. But if you're forgiving as you have been forgiven through Christ, it's possible to forgive anything. So, well, that's unforgivable. No, it's not. It's a difficult choice, but you can choose to forgive anything. And in our Christian walk, the first thing we have to do is accept that Christ paid the price for our sins and we are forgiven. And based on that, you have to forgive yourself, not based on your lackadaisical self-forgiving, but based on the fact that Christ already forgave you. Does that make sense? So we talk about relationships in Colossians 3, 18 through 25. It says, and I'm reading from, I believe it's the Good News Bible, but let me just double check. It is, nope, the New Living Translation. Okay, that's what it is, New Living Translation. Okay, it says, wives, submit yourselves to your husbands as is fitting for those who belong to the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and never treat them harshly. Children, always obey your parents, for this pleases the Lord. Fathers, do not aggravate your children, or they will become discouraged. Slaves, obey your earthly masters in everything you do. Try to please them all the time, not just when they are watching you. Serve them sincerely because of your reverent fear of the Lord. Work willingly at whatever you do as though you were working for the Lord rather than for people. Remember that the Lord will give you an inheritance as your reward, and that the master you are serving is Christ. But if you do what is wrong, you will be paid back for the wrong you have done, for God has no favorites. Okay? This is the basis of good enough never is. And it's important when we look at relationships because churches are not exempt from relationship problems. Shocking, I know. Several of you are passing out even now as I say that. Including marriages. But, marriages, when they have difficulties, almost always come down to some level of unforgiveness. Right? And when they fall apart, it's because we've gone to the point of I'm not going to forgive for that. Right? We've drawn a line in this. That's it. I've drawn a line in the sand. I'm not going there. Right? I have chosen to not forgive. And yet the Bible is very clear about how important forgiveness is, because if we don't forgive, we're not going to be forgiven. How do you forgive? How do you forgive in a wounded marital relationship? Well, you have to go to God. Without God, it's impossible. Without God, it's impossible to forgive on that level, because we can certainly defend our position on how hurt we are and how all these things have gone wrong and it's not our fault and I did everything I was supposed to do and blah, blah, you know what I'm saying? Now, there can be physically harmful relationships where literally someone's life or whatever is at risk, and that's a whole different level of things we have to deal with, right? but just the marriage fell apart because we remodeled the kitchen. Don't laugh. It's one of the top things that causes marriages to fall apart. Oh, yeah. Yep. Just the stress, the financial stress, the opinion stress, all that stuff. It manifests, and marriages fall apart. They fall apart over the intimate, the sexual side of things, oftentimes, and they many times fall apart over communication issues. And it's sort of humorous when you look. I guess I don't know. Humorous might be the wrong word, but when you look at it, they'll start with something, right? It starts with a communication issue, and so then that leads to a failure to have intimacy, and then that leads to a different issue, and it can go the other way, right? No intimacy leads to we're not going to talk, and so it falls all apart. And it's around these simple little things that become huge factors in a relationship. And again, goes back to forgiveness. It could be stuff from your past. You're dragging it around behind you. Right? And if you're dragging it around behind you, you're just bringing problems into everything you do. Forgive. Let it go. Children, they're no problem. Right? Yes. It says fathers, don't aggravate your children. Right? But it also says children, obey your parents. Right? And so when we start looking at the family unit, which is one of the great things that we have as a failure in America these days, is the family unit. What's it say? It says, wives, submit to your husbands. I don't want to. Right? He's an idiot. You watch TV, they'll reinforce that idea. I don't know if you've noticed that, but men on most TV commercials are morons. Okay? And that's on purpose. They do that. It says, wives, submit to your husbands as fitting for those who belong to the Lord. Submit to your husband as one who belongs to the Lord. Who's your accountability to? The Lord. Well, I don't like submitting to him. Well, how about you submit to him as the Lord has commanded, as you would to the Lord? Why? Because that's what the word says. And then it says, husbands, love your wives and never treat them harshly. No, love your wives. We could go into the as Christ loved the church. We there's plenty of verses there, but it's love your wives in an accountability before God, and never treat them harshly. That's, we could talk about striking a woman or whatever, but it's even more so than that. The reality is this: there are times when I might have had a disagreement with my wife where I could have said something that would have cut her to the quick. But I didn't. Why? That's not what God's word says. Right? See, in a relationship, a marriage relationship, you have the ability to hurt one another. The question is, do you have the restraint to be forgiving and not hurt one another? If the two shall become one, what does hurting your spouse do for you? It hurts. There's nothing good that comes out of it. You don't even win the argument. If you're arguing with your wife, she's just going to say, fine. And then it's really, you lost big time. Right? Because that word has 97 million meanings, and one of them isn't going to be good for you. But see, that's not forgiving, right? That's dealing harshly. Children, always obey your parents, for this pleases the Lord. Why am I obeying my parents? Because I'm trying to please the Lord. Fathers, don't aggravate your children or they're going to become discouraged. Discouraged in what? In everything. There's a meme running around that says something to the effect of, when you criticize your children, they don't hate you, they hate themselves. And that's very true. You tear them down. It's the same thing you do if you tear down your spouse. One of the things we talk about often in marital counseling situations is stop making your spouse the butt of jokes. Don't speak badly about them. Don't make fun of them. Why? Because there's an element of that hurts. It's like the fact that in society we have comedians and they're really not very talented. So they tell things in their jokes that are sexually explicit and they're designed to embarrass you because when you're embarrassed, you'll laugh. But it's not talent at all. And we've kind of glorified that in our society. Give me back Red Skelton. He was funny. Your employers. How are you going to deal with your employers? Well, it's good enough. No, it's not good enough. I'm not doing it for my employer. I'm doing it for God. So what I need to do is the best I can possibly do. I need to go to God in prayer and say, God, help me to do better at this. As I said, it's easy to lose sight of these things sometimes. And we just need a little wake-up call. Good enough never is a phrase that is around me all the time. Literally. I keep a mug on my desk that I have water in, that I drink water out of, and on it says, good enough never is. And yet I can lose sight of that sometimes too. It's if we're playing worship, Pastor Steve and Randy and I are playing worship, we can say, well, that's good enough. But it's not. It's way different when it's the best. We talk about that often, wow, that we really got in the right place today, or we didn't, or whatever. Pastor Steve is not content with that's good enough. He wants it to be the best. Now, there's individual pieces. You could replace me with somebody who plays better than me, and they would do better. But if I can do my best, whatever that is, right? If I can do my best and try and push to that level, then that helps the whole thing be better, right? But the idea is, who am I playing worship for? But it ain't Pastor Steve. It's for God. And so if I say, well, that's good enough, God. No, it's not. He gave his best for me. The world at large. Think about how it would be if we just approached the idea that we wanted to be the best for God in every encounter we have in the world. You know that clerk at Walmart that just screws everything up? You get so frustrated with, boy, I'll tell them. What if you forgave them and put your best foot forward in being able to forgive and show God's love and grace? What if you did that? What if instead of saying to somebody, you did a really poor job, you really suck at this, what if you said, is there anything I can do to help? I know you can do better. A different way to look at it, huh? That person that cut you off in traffic. God, I forgive them. Help them to do better. Instead of whatever else you say. Right? There's a better way to see. See, giving my best in all things. Giving my best in all things. Asking yourself the question, is there more that I could do here? Can I do something better here? Could I behave better? Could I be a better witness for the Lord? Could I be more forgiving? Could I show more love? Am I just doing good enough, or am I doing my best? What if I had the attitude that I wanted to forgive the most in all things? I want to be the first one to forgive, and I want to be the one who forgives the most. Why? Because that's what Christ did. He first loved me and gave forgiveness, and he forgave everything. And if I want to be Christ-like, I need to think about it from that perspective. See, is God first in all things, or am I first in all things? If God is first in all things, then the standard is good enough never is. If I'm first in all things, then it's like, well, that's good enough. Right? Keeping an account. We need to keep an account of our life before God. We're going to give an account of our life. We don't need to give an account so that we can walk around feeling like 1,000,000 pounds of sin on a stick. We need to be able to forgive ourselves because Christ forgave us, not because I want to let myself off easy. And we can have some way to remind ourselves of that, some motto, if you will, and you can figure out what you want to use, but I can just tell you that for the last 17 years, for me, it's been summed up in that simple phrase, good enough never is. And when I remind myself of that, I perform at a different level, I live at a different level, I'm accountable at a different level than when I lose sight of that. Good enough never is. I need to give my best because Christ gave his best to me. And there is joy in doing your best that doesn't exist anywhere else. There is joy in doing the best. And there can be joy when you can forgive. There can be joy when you strive to do your best. Even when you fail, but fail at doing your best, not fail at doing the least. So that's what I want to put before you today. Go out and do your best for God, because good enough never is. And that's it for today.